Good afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. Today we're debuting an ongoing series celebrating UVM's natural areas. Every Friday in October we will air a program that focuses on one of UVM's 10 designated natural areas. Today we begin with Shelburne Pond. The H. Lawrence Achilles Natural Area at Shelburne Pond consists of over 1,000 acres of uplands and wetlands in the town of Shelburne. It's located along the shores of Shelburne Pond, the largest undeveloped body of water in the Champlain Valley. Numerous trails crisscross a forest that's home to sugar maple, ash, and hemlock. A number of rocky outcroppings along the trail make Shelburne Pond a popular location for fishing. And to help me kick off this series, I'm joined by Lori Anderson. She's the UVM Natural Areas Coordinator and Stewardship Manager. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
In a minute, we'll dive a little bit more into Shelburne Pond specifically, but first, how does UVM acquire these natural areas?
The natural area system at UVM was actually started back in 1974, and that's why we're celebrating the 50th anniversary this year. And it was started, there were several people who were influential in making the whole thing happen, but a professor named Hub Vogelman, he was a botany professor, and he recognized some of the areas around the state of Vermont that had a high conservation value. And he was able to lobby the UVM Board of Trustees to start a natural area system. And so the first natural areas actually were lands already owned by UVM back that they had acquired in the early 1900s, and that would be Centennial Woods, Redstone Quarry. And then over the years, lands have been acquired through donations, purchases, and we've gotten to 10 natural areas now that we steward and maintain.
Great, let's actually dive into the first one from this series. To give our viewers a bird's eye view of Shelburne Pond, Across the Fence's Ben Willis took our drone over the flora and fauna to learn how UVM researchers test the waters of Shelburne Pond to understand the environmental challenges faced by Vermont's many waterways. Here's Ben.
The H. Lawrence Achilles Natural Area at Shelburne Pond is the University of Vermont's largest natural area. The pond's surrounding trails and boat launch offer recreation opportunities to the public. It's also the site of Native American archaeological finds and continues to offer opportunities for aquatic researchers at the University of Vermont. But like many bodies of water in the state, Shelburne Pond is also known for another feature: cyanobacteria. This threat to the natural ecosystem also provides an opportunity for UVM researchers, such as Associate Professor Anna Morales-Williams of the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources.
Shelburne Pond is a little bit unique in Vermont, but not unique in the rest of the world in that it's a very impacted lake and has these persistent cyanobacteria blooms. Problems. And so we work on a lot of different lakes in Vermont. We work on small inland lakes in the Northeast Kingdom. We work on Lake Champlain. And overall, Vermont's lakes are pretty good quality relative to the rest of at least the US. But Shelburne Pond, it has these persistent problems. And so my background is in cyanobacteria blooms specifically and how they affect lake ecosystem function, which just means all the different processes that are happening in the lake and how that stuff feeds back. And so I had an opportunity to do some cyanobacteria bloom research funded by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey.
Morales-Williams is conducting research on how major rainfall events can affect cyanobacteria levels in Vermont's lakes.
So this project is all about how extreme events and the sequence of extreme events trigger and maintain cyanobacteria blooms and lake ecosystem function. And so we're interested in when we have big heat waves followed by storms, or big storms followed by heat waves, how does that sequence of events affect both the tributaries of Shelburne Pond and Shelburne Pond itself in driving these bloom events.
That's still at 76%.
For all the research that's already been done on cyanobacteria, there is still a great deal left to be learned.
So the question of are blooms increasing is actually not really agreed on. In some parts of the world, blooms are not increasing. In some parts of the US, they're staying pretty stable. And so the question is kind of, are they increasing or are we noticing them more? I'm actually leading another large study to ask that question with researchers all over the globe. So we're doing some large-scale analysis of many different lakes and literature to try to figure out, are they increasing? And there is good evidence that in some places they are.
Morales-Williams points out that it's important to better understand these blooms and what can cause them to worsen, because there are implications for both the ecosystems of our lakes, but also for human health.
Be sure not to let your dog in the lake or swim in the lake.
From a public health perspective, they produce dangerous toxins, and so they can produce hepatotoxins, which impact liver function. They can produce neurotoxins, which can cause a whole suite of things like tetanus-like paralysis to memory loss and all sorts of things. Generally, those things don't affect humans unless you're drinking glasses of water from the pond, which we don't do. But there are dangers for dogs and other small animals that are recreating in the pond, and so that's the big public health concern. But there's other important effects on the lake ecosystem. So cyanobacteria aren't a great quality food for things that like to eat algae and other small organisms relative to other types of algae. They become really prolific and form a lot of biomass in the pond, which as they die and decay, they can consume oxygen, and so that affects fish habitat. And just overall what the lake is doing the rest of the year. And so it changes how gases are emitted when these oxygen levels deplete.
This is not a new threat to Shelburne Pond. The data that has been collected from soil cores taken from the pond show that cyanobacteria has been impacting it for decades, if not longer.
It's been impacted for a long time, and we know from the paleolimnological records, so that when we take lake sediment cores, we can look back in time and track how productive it's been, how much algae has been there over, decades, multi-decades to centuries. And so we know that the record of eutrophication or pollution has gone back in Shelburne Pond for many, 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 many years. And so these problems are not necessarily new, and whether they're worse, we're not sure. It's been in this state for some time, I guess, is the problem. But that doesn't mean we don't need to do something about it, right? And so Shelburne Pond has a long way to go to be fixed, but we're thinking about ways to do that.
Associate Professor Morales-Williams' work demonstrates the many opportunities this natural area has to offer for land and water research, as well as stewardship projects. At Shelburne Pond, I'm Ben Willis with Across the Fence.
Thank you to Ben, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about UVM's designated natural areas with Lori Anderson, UVM Natural Areas Coordinator and Stewardship Manager. So many of these natural areas, including Shelburne Pond, have trails and some other amenities. So who's doing the trail maintenance for that?
So that would be me. UVM has an environmental program, and there's a director of our environmental program, and then he hires a natural areas coordinator, and right now that's me, and then I hire student interns to help do the work too. There was about a 5-year gap when we didn't have a natural areas coordinator, and so a decision was made that role really needed to be filled because some of the trails and the signs and things were in a little bit of disrepair. So I have been fortunate enough over the past 9 months to be in that role, and I'm hoping to really do a lot of work on the trails and contact with the community who's using the trails and stewarding the natural areas and doing some work with things like habitat restoration, working with trying to get rid of some of the invasive species we have moving into the natural areas. So there's just all kinds of work to be done, and I've got lots of help doing it.
Speaking of help, there are a lot of other conservation groups in Vermont, like the Land Trust, the Vermont Land Trust, and the Green Mountain Club. Do you work at all with these other organizations in the maintenance?
Yes, I am so fortunate to be able to work with the Green Mountain Club, for example. They maintain trails on the Long Trail, and the Long Trail goes through our Mount Mansfield natural area, so they do the trail maintenance there, and we'll probably be coordinating with them more on things like interpretive displays and information for the public. But they do a phenomenal job of maintaining the trail and contacting the public on Mount Mansfield, letting people know about the alpine environment and how fragile it is, and getting people to stay on the trails. We work with the Nature Conservancy. They were instrumental in helping to acquire some of the lands that we have, such as Shelburne Pond, and they've been great in terms of what they'll do often is acquire the land, put a conservation easement on the land, and then transfer the land over to UVM for ownership. And so that's how we acquired some of our natural areas. And they're great to work with when issues come up about management activities. Could a certain activity happen on this land or not? Is it in keeping with the conservation value of the land?
And UVM students, of course, love to have class outside and get outside, get their hands dirty a little bit. So other than the interns who you mentioned work with to help maintain those areas, do students have the opportunity to go outside themselves and use those conserved areas?
They do. Centennial Woods would be the one area that's right next to campus, and many students go into Centennial Woods both for classes, whether it be botany classes or natural resource management classes. Students also use the areas. We have student clubs that use the areas. There's an outdoor club that uses it for orienteering. There's a forestry club, and students have been really helpful in helping us remove down trees from the area. I've seen students do bits of nature artwork and leave them by the sides of the trail. And I think a lot of students just go into the woods to get a break from the human environment, to just be in nature, and it helps with reducing stress levels. So yes, there's all kinds of uses of the natural areas.
So is there a plan for the university to acquire more of these natural spaces?
There isn't a plan in particular, but right now what we really want to focus on is just improving the trails and the signs and the public access and the habitat management in the areas we have. But having said that, if someone were to approach us with a piece of land and they wanted to donate it to UVM, we would certainly look at that land and look at the conservation value and decide if we would like to add it to the natural areas.
Sure, so you're not opposed to it?
Not opposed to it.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. To learn more about UVM's natural areas, you can visit the website on your screen or tune in every Friday in October when Across the Fence takes you to UVM's wildest places. Next week, we venture into the most frequently visited UVM natural area, Centennial Woods. And I hope you'll join us then. That takes care of our program for today. My thanks to the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX who make our programs possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.